Do you want to know what the fallen are, little one? In a sense, they are angels, but not the angels your mom imagines she prays to. Brass trumpets picnicking in the clouds. In their true essence, they are great swirling engines of wing and blood, fiery eyes that peer around the corners between worlds. Dark, radiant things conjured from fresh battlefields. A Frankenstein's Valkyrie, forever crashing to Midgard. What grief demands their hate, what vast cannibal hunger.
Welcome to the Fallen Cycle. This is a universe full of secrets, waiting for those brave or foolhardy enough to seek them out. Tales from When I Had a Face was written by James Curcio, with editing by Brian Johnson. A modern fairy tale about death, loss, and finding redemption in the strangest places, for those of us still haunted by the uncertain, occult logic of dreams. The soundtrack features the work of David Bessel, along with contributions from Jen E., P. Emerson Williams, and James Curcio, from the archives of past Mythos projects. Support for this project is pivotal. By becoming a patron at patreon.com/mythosmedia, that's MYTHOS media, you enable us to make more content like this, and to be able to hire on more freelance artists in future works. You can also discover more about the Mythpunk Fallen Cycle universe at fallencycle.com. This podcast contains adult themes and may induce psychosis. And now, this week's episode. Chapter 2, Nefalibita. Wait, stop! You can't just step through a doorway in the sky, young Ayta said to her Gran, looking up with a mock scowl. She flexed her arms. I'm 8 now. I'm not a child anymore. Of course you are, Gran said patiently. Ayta was so hungry for more tales of the second world, but just as eager to ask questions about them. Was your face cracked then? Ayta asked, brightening in curious excitement. Then, without taking another breath, and where was this cell anyway? And how did you understand their speech? And how did you... Slow down. No, it wasn't cracked, as you say. We'll get to all that later. Gran looked over at the candle that glowed warmly in the window, a reminder that it was time for the tales. Gran patted her lap with an ashen hand and motioned for her granddaughter to sit. You are all over the place today. An Oyon must learn of flow, little owl, she said, and cleared her throat. Very well. Let me take a step back from our time spent in that cell beneath their holy temple, to speak instead of how New Babylon grew into the second world, a desolate tree at the heart of the desert. They are one and the same, if you follow me. But if this confuses your young mind because it is out of order, it's your own damned fault for asking. Ayta nodded, her eyes wide. So, Gran said, this story has not yet come to pass, but it will, sure as one season follows the next. She drew herself up to her full height and dimmed the lights. I've spied the plans of fallen gods, you might say.
You want to know what the fallen are, little one? In a sense, they are angels, but not the angels your mom imagines she prays to, brass trumpets picnicking in the clouds. In their true essence, they are great swirling engines of wing and blood, fiery eyes that peer around the corners between worlds. Dark, radiant things conjured from fresh battlefields. A Frankenstein's Valkyrie, forever crashing to Midgard. What grief demands their hate? What vast cannibal hunger? She was and will one day again be known as Lilith, an avatar born in flesh and bone, a martyr for her own cause. One of the 12 who die and return like the moon waxes and wanes. By the look of things outside the window, I imagine her coming is near at hand. I have seen what changes she will bring to Alterran over the course of an aeon. So I can tell you what will come to pass, sure as it has already happened, even though I'll not live to see her fall. You might, young as you are. Even as one candle goes out, another comes to light. What things you will see with those pretty eyes of yours. I know this much. Once she has their attention, with a face plastered on every screen and poster. Then she will disappear between the crease of sky and land, like a great eyelid folding shut. Like that children's story of the Pied Piper. But this is no children's story, I tell you, my dear. Reawakened to the chaos beyond their quaint suburbs, it is but the first rumble of a storm that'll one day turn this world to ash. Meaningless as waving a flag, and yet the waving of flags has killed millions. It has always been so. And so they led their followers to ruin, hundreds of teens strewn about like discarded cups after a drunken party in a field. A first sacrifice ritually offered up to her, a first feast after her long gestation steeped in our dreams. No one knows exactly what will happen beyond the mountains on that night, out in the empty spaces where the lightning flickers and the clouds crouch low. But there, down below her broken body, she will make her final bed. A rusty coffin cocooned underneath the stars, in which those dreams shape the future of Alterran. No more will she return to this earth as the others of her kind do. She set her sights on a place where she could one day reign in perpetuity. From her coffin, she will put out rhizomes into Alterran soil, tendrils that mindlessly seek after blood. Her children will feed her so much of it through the ages. First, it will be the procession of animals sacrificed at the spot of her interment. She will drink deeply in those years, and her roots will thicken. Finally, her trunk will burst forth from the other side, like a bristlecone pine, dappled with just the barest hint of green. She must protect herself from the sun, after all, for though she feeds on its light, she is a thing of the dark. You might say Lilith paved the way, creating an avenue for escape as things in this world grow ever more dire. Humans would inevitably follow through the thin spaces widened by her probing roots. She made possible an exodus en masse. Your grandfather once told me that her kind are not meant to inhabit that place, and that her incubation will one day have vast consequences. Well, he was wrong, and he was right. Eventually, animals will not be enough to satisfy her hunger, and so they will begin ensnaring those who wander too far into her domain. All lost sleepwalkers will join her in her twilight bower, sooner or later. In the forgotten years following her death, it will creak and crack under the weight of all her suckling young, yet to be born. That lone tree will grow tall out in the desert, her roots spread wide and deep. Amongst the roots that still sup on her bones, fresh springs rise, water welling from the deep earth, and around that sand-swept grave sprouts her outer city. Many distant wanderers from the four corners of the desert will take refuge in its baleful shadow and call their home New Babylon, the city of lost dreams. For her domain exists ever in expectation of the apocalypse through which she re-enters the second world to join her children who would have otherwise been snuffed out. Mothers will look up toward the tree beyond the temple gates in awe and whisper to their daughters, "She will return," as if their goddess might overhear from her womb within eternity and awake that very instant. Yes, they fear her and love her and yearn for her return from the void, and so they were fashioned as Babylon's congregation. The fanatics who will seek her final resting place fancy themselves as such, and through them the myth of Babylon might be re-sown with new magics. Untold generations of them lay stones around the trunk of her tree, aligned with the passage and perturbations of the second sun. In this way, the temple will grow, one giant block at a time, as her children engrave her face on those stones in their hundreds and sacrifice 100 hearts to her thirsty roots below. Built so large that it seems a feature of the geography, battered over 1,000 cycles by wind and sand, dominating the skyline for many miles into the deep desert. Yet it is no mountain, but constructed by devout human hands through methods no longer known, not even whispered of beyond the walls of the outer city that ring its base. Her temple, really a great stained altar stone, broad and squat but still rising far into the sky, a votive, is constructed in levels, with a second and then a third and so on, up to 7. For this is her number and written into all her lore. Some say when she finally falls from the heavens, she'll wear a crown of 7 jagged stars that'll slit the sky's throat. So it is that the sisters wear crowns the color of brooding twilight. 7 sisters, 7 towers, 7 spikes atop their crowns. Did they choose a constellation in the sky with just so many stars and not more? No one remembers, though everyone has a story. When finished, there will stand a ziggurat, many hundreds of yards on a side, surrounded by towers capped with bronze domes. Its full height is ascended by way of a stair that winds its way upward like a ribbon around a maypole, and at its base, gates leading to the city beyond. About halfway up there lies a shelter for those who make that arduous journey, eager for the slaves they would later offer their goddess. One night, when the desert crickets sing her tune for the 10,000th time, her eyes will open again in the second world. On the day that follows, who can say? Her desires are implacable and impossible to divine. Hers is a magic that runs through our very dreams, a world incubated in death, as all living worlds are born from death. She still slumbers in her hive. She who has worn so many guises, she no longer remembers they are all only a fantasy. She who imagined herself as a goddess, who will one day awake from death and again be given birth in the minds of all men, and so she shall. Amen.
Gran leaned back in her chair, her mind wandering to the bustling bazaar of the outer city, the terror of the blood-drenched temple, the fields of wheat that stretched out from the walls until they were lost to sight in the desert, the Amari windships drifting lazily off toward their home, the city of stars. Minutes of silence passed. "I'm sorry, dear. I've gone wandering in the clouds. Forgive an old lady." She looked out the window at the city traffic below, cars and people plodding along on a rainy summer afternoon. This world was nothing like the one she'd seen in her visions, though its curse was evident to all who might look. "Do you remember where we were in the story, my granddaughter?" "You were running through the forest to escape mean men, and then you fell into the second world and found yourself with 2 others. And, I don't know, everything was strange," Ayta said, hiding her face bashfully in her palms. Gran firmly slid a long finger under Ayta's chin and pulled until she dropped her hands and placed them, conscientiously, on her knees. "Never hide, never feel shame," Gran said, wagging a lanky finger in the air. Then she smiled. "Yes, that's right, little owl. So there I was, gradually awakening from the fleeting recollection of my flight, into this yet stranger second world of Alterran." That's all for this week's episode. Stay up to date with upcoming episodes by subscribing at fallencycle.podbean.com or wherever you prefer to listen to your podcasts. Check out the work of the contributing musicians. Those links and additional information is available in the text provided along with this episode. This audio edition was produced by James Kershaw, along with text-to-speech synthesis. A statement on the use of LLMs is available on our website for those curious about how we do and don't use these technologies. This podcast is Creative Commons 3.0, Attribution, Share and Share alike, non-commercial use.